September 11th, 2001 is a date that will forever be etched into our nation's history. On that day, we witnessed unspeakable tragedy, but we also witnessed remarkable acts of courage and selflessness. Firefighters and emergency services personnel were the first to respond to the terrorist attacks and worked tirelessly to save their fellow citizens. We shall never forget the firefighters who made the ultimate sacrifice to save others on 9/11, and their fellow firefighters who have suffered in later years from illnesses attributed to their own heroic actions. Over the past 26 years, I've had the distinct honor of working with leaders of the Congressional Fire Services Caucus in Washington, D.C. to build support for federal legislation and programs that benefit our nation's firefighters and emergency services personnel. There are 8 members of Congress who serve as co-chairs of the Fire Caucus, 4 members from the United States Senate and 4 members from the House of Representatives, 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. Since 1987, Fire Caucus leaders have worked in a spirit of bipartisanship to advocate for federal support for our nation's firefighters and emergency services personnel. The Congressional Fire Services Institute asked these members if they could share their personal thoughts on 9/11, where they were on that tragic day, and what thoughts were going through their minds while they witnessed the events unfolding in New York City, Arlington, Virginia, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We also offered them the opportunity to express personal words of gratitude to the firefighters who responded with uncommon valor on September 11th, and to all firefighters who place their lives on the line every day to keep our communities safe. On behalf of the CFSI Board of Directors and staff, thank you to all members of the Fire and Emergency Services for your dedication and commitment to this great nation of ours. You are that beacon of light that has guided so many fellow Americans out of their darkest hours, and for that, we and our entire nation are truly grateful.
On September 11th, 2001, I was in Colstrip, Montana. Then I was on the state legislature in an interim committee called the Environmental Quality Council, and we were looking at coal bed methane wells and their impacts on the environment. I had a car that I was driving down the road in, Celica, almost new, bought in June of that year. Why that's important is because it had a CD player in it, so I didn't listen to the news. Until I got out at the first coal bed methane well, and it was explained that a plane had hit one of the towers, and then shortly thereafter another tower. I didn't have a visual of that, but we'd had news reports on the radio about what had happened. I did not grasp the full impact of what was happening in New York City that day, or in Pennsylvania, or here in Washington, D.C. But the fact is that changed later when I got to see it on TV.
20 years have passed, but the memory of September 11th, 2001 remains as vivid as if it were yesterday. I was in my Washington office with the television on when the second plane hit. It was then that I knew I was witnessing a deliberate attack on our country. On the evening of that terrible day, members of Congress gathered on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. With tears in our eyes and sorrow in our heart, together we sang "God Bless America." The emotions of shock, anger, and grief were joined by unity, resolve, and patriotism. Today, that moment on that terrible day remains my most enduring memory. The sense of unity, resolve, and patriotism that swept over us was a source of strength that we needed for the challenges we were facing, and of inspiration for our country.
I was in my apartment. I had just come back from an early meeting at the Capitol. I needed to get some papers. The phone rang. I remember my son David called, "Dad, did you see just what happened?" I said, "No, I got to run to another meeting." He says, "Well, you ought to put your TV on." And I remembered that because I remember somebody knocking at my door and telling me to get the hell out of the apartment because they wanted all the congressmen to be accountable. And then we went into the streets, gathered together. We went into different places where we could have protection to find out what's really going on. That day provided nightmares for me for at least 2 months.
When I think about that day, I remember many things, as we all do. I remember the pain of grief. I remember the fear and anguish of those trying desperately to survive. I remember the anger we all felt in the aftermath of the attacks. But what I remember most from that day is courage. The courage of first responders rushing into the burning towers. The courage of firefighters volunteering from all across the country who went to Ground Zero, the Pentagon, and Pennsylvania. And the courage of our law enforcement personnel as well. Our domestic responders acted with courage and patriotism.
That morning, at that time, I was still, though I was a state rep, I was also a firefighter with the city of Murfreesboro. And when I looked, my wife said, and we had a small television that was in the kitchen, and she said, look, a plane has hit one of the towers in New York. And I went over, and so as a firefighter, I started grabbing hold of TV and explaining to her, if the firefighters are going to deal with this, the concern is those that are trapped above and what we're doing and how they've got to deal with it. And I'm actually talking about it, holding on the TV when the next plane came through and hit. And then I instantly spun to her and said, we're under attack. And that was where I was. And it is our 9/11, or it is our Pearl Harbor. If you're from this generation, the generation I am, you do remember exactly where you were.
For the folks who responded that day, your heroism is something that I will never forget. Seeing you in very hard conditions, and that may be an understatement. To be able to work and to be able to respond and to be able to use the tools that you had learned to make sure that you were doing the best you could to keep people safe is really important. And I think about my own local fire department in Big Sandy, Montana. And this volunteer department is just community members that go out and they learn and they also respond when their community needs them. And I will never forget the firemen for their ability to do that and do it in such a professional way.
We can only dimly grasp the skill and discipline and courage it takes to rescue and tend to a victim of a fire or an accident in the midst of confusion and danger. But we are deeply grateful to those of you who have this courage and dedication, this skill and discipline that you take with you to work each and every day. Thank you so much for all that you do to protect us, and may God bless you all.
To my brother and sisters who are the first responders that we lost and that were on Ground Zero of any of the locations, we're trained and we know that there's going to be those times where we have to go in. And I want to thank them, and I want to thank the firefighters and all police officers and emergency service personnel that treat the medical side for what they do, because it is not a natural thing to run towards the danger. It's a natural thing to run away from the danger, but yet they run towards it knowing that they're risking their own life to save others. And I want to thank them.
I would say to these heroes, we have not forgotten your sacrifices. We will never forget. I will never forget. I will never forget the towers falling. I will never forget the smoke. I will never forget the men and women who spent weeks and months at Ground Zero. We have worked for the years to make sure the men and women who got sick at Ground Zero are taken care of. It has been almost 20 years, but we have never stopped trying. And I want to add this. It's a difficult time, my friends. There have been many heroes during the pandemic, but maybe no one has exhibited more bravery and done more on the front lines to keep our nation afloat than our first responders. Our first responders have literally run towards this virus to keep us all alive. They put their lives on the line to shield us. Once again, we owe them everything.
Today, my friends, we are united in our remembrance. So let us all seek unity in our determination to live together as fellow Americans, to beat back the forces of division and hatred, and to overcome together the global pandemic we now face. Because 9/11 taught us surely that the answer to our toughest challenges is courage and unity. Courage and unity. Let us unite in paying tribute to the courageous ones we lost. And let us have the courage to seek unity again today. And may God bless our firefighters and emergency responders, and may God bless America.
September 11th will forever be a day when we pause and pay tribute to the firefighters who responded on that tragic day 20 years ago. We honor the 343 FDNY members who died when the Twin Towers collapsed. We also pay tribute to the many firefighters and EMS personnel who have since died from illnesses and injuries that can be traced back to 9/11. 20 years later, many firefighters who responded on 9/11 still require support to overcome illnesses and injuries that continue to plague them. We will not forget them and the challenges they face, but we will continue to offer our support to help them and their families move forward in their lives. There is one line in the Gettysburg Address that I want to share with you because I think it truly captures why, after 20 years, 9/11 remains so vividly in our minds. Said Lincoln on the battlefields of Gettysburg to commemorate the lives lost, "The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, while it can never forget what they did here." What our firefighters did on 9/11 to save thousands of lives is truly a testament to their uncommon valor. It is the images of those firefighters capturing expressions of valor, strength, resolve, and sadness that will forever remind us how our nation sustained itself during her darkest hours. We shall never forget what they did.